Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrik Klicman, and I am a doctoral student in University of Evangelist Purkyně in Ústí nad Labem in Czech Republic. And my current research is about ice hockey in Czechoslovakia between 1946 to 1951. Ice hockey in Czechoslovakia has some kind of dominant role all the time, especially even in times of Second World War, when there were still the Czech-Moravian Ice Hockey League. But immediately after the war, when the Alliance forces liberated Czechoslovakia, was decided that in next year it will be again the Czechoslovakian Ice Hockey League. So it was just 6 months after the war and in Europe. It was one of the reasons why the league was renewed so fast was because there were strong support from political parties, especially from communists and socialists, and from physically educational non-political parties as Sokol and Orel. There were one problem because there were big differences between Czech and Slovakian parts of the country, because in Czech part were almost 900 hockey clubs, and in Slovakian part only 35. But because it's Czechoslovakian Hockey League, it must be all over Czechoslovakia. So the leadership of Hockey Union decide that it will be one team from Slovakia, and it will be Slovan Bratislava from the capital city of Slovakia. So finally, renewed Czechoslovakian Hockey League for all state. Things start change after parliamentary government election in May 1946, where Communist Party had more than 30% of voters, so they get almost majority in parliament. And because they were so strong, other political parties make a coalition with them. And for sport, that means nothing, but they decide, all parties decide unify all sport organization in Czechoslovakia are under one organization, and that organization was Sokol. And the reason why it was Sokol were that Sokol were the biggest organization in Czechoslovakia for physical education, and it has almost 1 million members. That means that almost every 10th citizen of Czechoslovakia were in Sokol. Another thing were the preparation for the World Cup, which were in Prague in 1947. The government sent a lot of money to this to organize this World Cup, and actually it was great. It was the first Czechoslovakian gold medal from ice hockey in history. Breakpoint were year 1948. Season 1947-1948 was the last unpolitical season, and thanks to non-political influence in that, we can say that there were a success on Olympic Games in St. Maurice in 1948. The Czechoslovakian ice hockey team took silver medals, but only thanks to worse score. The gold medal, Canada has just better score, and that's why they won the tournament. The breakpoint were in February 1948, 1 month after Olympic Games, because after in February 1948, the Communist Party took all political power in Czechoslovakia, thanks to Communist Revolution. And after that, everything changed. There were a lot of consequences, especially for ice hockey. First, emigration. A lot of famed older hockey players emigrate from Czechoslovakia. For example, Josef Maleček, or the tennis champion of Wimbledon, Jaroslav Drobný. He was even a hockey player. And because these most famous players emigrate, the young people lost their idols. For example, another big thing were propaganda. Propaganda in newspapers. I choose example on airplane accident in 1948. In the end of 1948, the national hockey team traveled to London, to England, to play some kind of friendly hockey matches, and they travel into airplanes. And in the second one, were 6 players, and this airplane fall into the La Manche and disappear. They never find the plane or the players, but the propaganda says that all hockey players who were in that airplane emigrate to United States and France and Britain, of course. So they hate the Czechoslovakia and new political spectrum in Czechoslovakia. That brings us to destruction of legacy for old regime hockey clubs. Old regime is meaning for democratic hockey clubs, the bourgeois hockey clubs, especially LTC Prague, which was in the times LTC Prague were one of the best team in Europe, maybe one of the best hockey teams in the world for amateurs. But because of their fame, they often travels. Almost 80% of national hockey team were in LTC Prague. Example, you have in 1948, in one team is 15 players, and 11 of them were from LTC Prague. That's a lot. But regime hated this team, so they give stadium to another team, LTC Prague hockey stadium, and they made first army hockey club in Czechoslovakia. It was athletic, physically educational club of Prague, and in this club they make some kind of draft, and they send almost all young players in Czechoslovakia, especially from LTC Prague, to this hockey club. So LTC Prague lost some players thanks to immigration. Some players die in the airplane accident, and some players were lost thanks to this draft for Army Hockey Club. Destruction for all regime club. Final act for this regime were the World Cup in 1949. The Czechoslovakia won that tournament in Sweden. For the first time, there were used secret services as journalists or the technical members of or just functionaries for the trip, and they control the hockey players if they want to emigrate or not. And the last day, the youngest player of the team emigrated. He stayed in Sweden. He died 2 years ago in the United States, in Florida. But it was like the big red alarm for a regime that hockey players still emigrate. They can't come with them, with their society, with their new regime. It's time to do some process, and it's time to stop them. It's just hockey, it's sport, but we have interpolitics problems. We can let the sport and famed athletes leave the country. So they spend more money for army teams. They create 2 more ice hockey army teams. They took another young players because of national feeling. In army, you make more national feeling. So you won't stay in Czechoslovakia and play for Czechoslovakia. They took the same model as Soviet Union used in the times. The top came, or the end of these actions came in 1950 when the national hockey teams had forbidden championship. They cannot travel to London 1950 to take another gold medal. The explanation from government were that the journalists who should go there with teams don't have visas from Great Britain, but we know that we know that The journalists had their visas, but the government was scared that the team will emigrate, so they just forbid the travel to Great Britain. National hockey team's players were really angry about it, but they decide that they, at least if they can go to championship, they will celebrate newborn sons of one of the hockey players, Jiří Matselis. So they went to the pub. From 15 players, 16 players, 15 plus 1, 11 of them go to the pub that night to celebrate. The rest of them just travel home, and they start drinking, and they start defaming the state. They start speaking about immigration. They start singing a song about prime ministers and ministry of information. And someone called police officers and secret services to the pub to arrest them. That brings to fight with these secret services, but all even those who fled from the pub or those who were catched, all of them, 11 players, were catched that night in the pub and be imprisoned, and there start some interrogations. Problem were that all of these players were mostly young, and they didn't have much experiences, and they were part of the army, and they really did nothing wrong. They just sing a song and speak something against the regime. So the government and political regime needs some kind of leader who lead these rioters and who told them that they should emigrate or flee from Czechoslovakia. So they choose former goalkeeper of ice hockey, Bohumil Modrý, which ended his hockey career a year ago, and he was with his family on vacation in mountains to ski. Secret services found him and took him to interrogation, and after a little bit of torturing and beating, he was made as the leader of anti-communist league for sport, and he was made by the leader who took all hockey players from Czechoslovakia. So they constructed a trial with hockey players. There was a big difference between political processes and this one, because on political processes, for example, with lawyers or Democrats or former generals, they were always public and journalists, and they wrote a lot about it, but this was processed without witnesses. Even in journal newspapers, nowhere was any information about that national hockey team is in prison and they are the traitors of the nation. They just disappear somehow from the land. In the end, they just get their punishments. The former goalkeeper, the true victim of this process, Bohumil Modrý, was sentenced for 15 years in prison. The rest of the players, especially the young Augustin Bubník, has 14 years. And the rest you can see. They were even a little bit lucky, because in the year 1955, 5 years after their imprisonment, they were national amnesty, and all of them were just released to freedom. No one of them who were convinced in this trial could never play again for national hockey team, even if all of them have the same quality, and they were pardoned and finally abolished in the year 1968, almost 20 years after the process. But the biggest reason of the fall of Czechoslovakia was probably loss of this generation, because the regime must find new talents, and there were no some kind of process from old to the new one. It was just cut and nothing else. So even in next gold championship for Czechoslovakia came in 1972. That was actually 23 years later than anyone expected, especially that the team who was sentenced in 1950 should go again for the gold medals. Thank you for your attention. I hope you understand everything, and I will expect any questions in your discussion. Thank you very much.